Kathryn Trupin. I was born October 4th, 1928 in Barry City Hospital.
So my name is Michael Trupin. I am Kathryn's only child, and I was born May 27th, 1960, in Illinois.
Is there anything about your family surname that you want us to talk about at all? You know, are there any traditions about naming in your family, like being named after anyone or anything?
Well, in my case or in her case?
Either.
Okay. Well, the surname Trupin is a mere matter of chance, because the surname of the actual person from whom I and my father descended was different, but his grandmother outlived 4 husbands, and Trupin was the 3rd husband. So, but my mom's maiden name is Mears. You.
The Mearses had come from Massachusetts to Peacham and then to Marshfield.
So, can you tell me something about your family background? How or why did you or your family come to live in Marshfield?
Well, my mother was born and grew up in Cabot. My father was born and grew up in Marshfield. And he had bought the house up across the street, or the whole farm, and it included all of this property. And so he had already bought that before they were married, and so they then lived in the house up across the road.
So both.
So there were other family members in the area.
Well, both sides of my mom's family go way back in the Marshfield and Cabot area. And what on?
Yeah, one of my ancestors was the first settler in Cabot.
Which one was
Webster, Benjamin Webster.
So Benjamin Webster, and you could tell about how they arrived in the area.
Well, the tradition is that he had come to Cabot Plains area and had built a cabin of some sort there, and went back to Massachusetts, and then he and his wife and hired man came, and it was still winter, on snowshoes with their daughter in a wash tub on a hand sled, and she grew up. The daughter grew up and married a Rogers, and it was the beginning of a long clan of Rogers family. And my mother's mother was a Rogers.
So they were all up here
Yes, yeah.
in Cabot, so all the Rogers.
Yeah. What the Rogers family was in Cabot, later in Danville. Some.
Still some of them around.
And there's still Rogers around. So, yeah.
So what's the full name of your parents? The full name of your parents?
Well, the full name, well, my mother was Ruth Louise Norris Mears, and my father was Harry William Mears.
Did you have siblings?
No,
So you're an only child too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any physical characteristics that run in your family?
I would say so. We
possibly red hair.
Oh, really? Who had red hair?
My grandmother Norris.
Your grandmother Norris had red hair? Okay. Okay. We don't have color photographs going back before my mom's mother. I don't even know if there are any color photographs of your father. Not sure that there are.
I don't think so.
But there are certainly photographs of various ancestors. So I can certainly see a resemblance between myself and her father, who died before I was born. And yeah.
Are there any stories that have come down about your grandparents or whatnot, famous or infamous or otherwise, that you want to share?
Plenty. Let's.
Well, my mother's father was Samuel Norris, and he his father died in the Civil War, and as a 14-year-old boy, he started out as a fireman on a wood-burning engine, and he later became an engineer and worked at that for many years, and then ultimately they went back to live on the family farm with his wife's parents on the South Walden Road, and he still continued to commute to Hardwick and run an engine up to the quarries.
So her mother's maiden name was Norris, and her grandmother's maiden name was Rogers, and Rogers and Norris's were in Cabot, right? And
There weren't many Norrises, but because my grandfather only had sisters, but they married his two sisters and married prominent families in Cabot.
and so her mother grew up in the farm on the South Walden Road, which is kind of across from the Cabot town garage, I guess.
No, it's further up.
It's a little further. It's a little bit further up.
Oh, it's at Pikes now, I think.
But where and her father's family was in farm.
Oh,
Just
yeah,
up
they had a
Route
big farm just out of the village on Route 2.
This was your father had the farm in the village, and
Yeah, just above the village.
who
And
had
then
the farm in Cabot?
her-
Mother?
her mother's family
Cool.
up above Cabot on the South Walden Road. And in later years, both the two sets of grandparents lived across the road from each other,
The last two houses on the Cabot Road.
so right there in the village.
They knew each other well throughout the years.
I'm sorry.
They knew. Would you say they knew each other well for a long period of time, or?
I think they knew each other only because the children married.
Okay. Okay.
Although yeah, I guess that was mostly it. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
I mean, they were very different people.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and you can tell about your grandmother Mears where she grew up.
You know, she was a Haynes from Lower Cabot, and they owned the woolen mill.
So the house where she grew up is right
Where Paul Ruda lives now.
where Paul Ruda lives now,
This is where your mother grew up.
where her father's mother grew up. And when she was a young woman, she was employed.
Oh, she taught school. She taught school in that Lower Cabot school.
So in the schoolhouse that is now occupied by Dana Robinson and his wife, and they do performances there. It's a beautiful schoolhouse. So that's where it's not, it's right, I mean, the schoolhouse is right where there's a road down to the recycling. And so that
Pretty
school,
conspicuous.
that the school is beautiful and historic. Yeah.
So, what was it like to grow up here as a child?
I don't know. There were lots of other children in the village, lots of playmates. And
There were a lot of the horses figured importantly.
ponies,
Ponies.
horses. But I don't know. It's just growing up on a Vermont farm.
So, what were your favorite things to do for fun?
For fun. I don't know. We used to play cowboys and Indians in the barn.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was probably good to live in the village that way. Having playmates was easier than.
No, because there were plenty of playmates. The Haywoods lived next door, and Agnes Barnett lived the next door beyond. And the Lambertons lived just across the river, and there were plenty of playmates.
So, you mostly played outdoors, would you say?
Yeah, we played outdoors, we played indoors, we played in the barns.
The next door house, which was the Haywards, the small house between the two, not existing in those days. It was a big house with a lot of space to run around inside.
But we played a lot in the barns.
Uh-huh.
We played in the Haywood barn, and we used to play up at where the Barnetts lived. We played in the Barnett barn.
So, did you just run around in the barn, or did you have
Oh,
games?
no,
or-
in the Haywood barn, we used to pretend to put on plays.
Oh, Would you be out there in the barn when the weather was cold also, or?
I don't think so. Then we'd be out sliding.
Okay, okay.
And you mentioned horses and ponies. Did you have a horse or a pony as a child?
Yes.
And what would you use it for?
And we'd ride it.
Did you ride it as transportation?
No, just for fun. We were very friendly with the Bullards. He was a station master, and I used to ride up to the station and spend time with them.
Was this the train station?
This was the Marshfield depot, long gone, up at the top of Depot Road. So I mean.
Yes, when I was until recent years, the road out here was Depot Road. It was not School Street.
Yeah, it was Depot Road going out to Route 2. It would have still been called Depot Road.
Yeah, and then it was Upper Depot Road and Lower Depot Road.
And what the area around the depot where Upper and Lower cross would have looked quite different then from how it does now.
Yeah. There are houses there now. There are houses there then, but different houses.
And far fewer trees, right?
What?
Far fewer trees.
There were pastures, and there were some trees on the opposite side of the track.
Okay.
So you grew up on a farm. Does that mean you had chores?
I didn't have any particular barn chores, but in the haying I usually did the horse rake.
Can you describe that?
Wait, yeah, what was?
Well, it was 2 wheels with a rake. You would have to see one or see a picture of one to imagine what it's like. It was like it was a 2-wheel thing drawn by a horse, and there were levers that as you went along, it raked up the hay, and then you tripped a lever and it would dump, and you went round and round the field, and you dumped every time when you came around to the same place. So the windrows ended up in long rows, and then somebody came along with a pitchfork and pitched them into piles, and then they got haycocks, and then they got pitched onto a wagon, taken to the barn.
There was nothing like a baler in those days.
No.
All
Well,
done
there
by-
were balers, but they were stationary things, I think, that, and it was not a common practice.
Right. Okay.
So did you make bales, or was it all just a
No,
pile?
It was loaded on a wagon and taken into the barn and pitched off into the mows, and
into the
or there was a fork on a rope that would grab hay off the wagon and swing it over into the bay.
But somebody would be pulling the rope.
A horse.
A horse would be pulling the rope.
Yeah.
And now the horse with the rake, did you were you riding the horse or leading?
No, you were sitting. There was a seat above the rake. It was
okay.
You sat on.
So you had like reins.
Yeah, and there were things you kicked with your feet to operate the rake.
Okay. And that rake is long disappeared.
It's probably some around somewhere.
But the one that you used.
Oh, long gone.
What was your least favorite thing about the farm, or growing up on a farm?
I guess I liked everything about it.
Yeah. So how old would you have been when you were operating that rake?
Teenager.
So tell us a little about the farm. How many rooms were in the house?
Oh, the house is still sitting up there.
How
Yeah.
many rooms?
Well, it was a big, it's a pretty big house. There were just three of us. We didn't really use the second floor very much. It was a kitchen and, oh, I don't know.
It was very
The use
different
of it
from that.
has changed over the years. We've changed around what we did. Where the kitchen was has changed many times. And
So when you were growing up, it was a two-story
It was still
farmhouse with
Yeah.
bedrooms upstairs. How many?
well, actually, there was a bedroom downstairs, and because of problems of heat and stuff, I slept in my parents' room until I was pretty good sized, and then I slept in another room, which really wasn't a bedroom.
And was this so you could close some of the house off to not have to heat it?
Oh yeah,
Did you, was it closed off so that air couldn't rise? I mean, did you
no,
guys?
we just kept the doors into the hall closed.
Okay, right.
So how many bathrooms were in the house when you were growing up?
One,
Okay.
Yeah.
Did it have electricity
yes. Oh, everybody in the village had electricity.
and indoor plumbing?
Yes.
Well, not every, I mean, I'm sure there were plenty of folks who didn't have indoor plumbing.
No, but the house over here, this place that burned, my cousin lived there, and that house was two apartments, first floor and second floor, and there was a bathroom on the second floor, which is not where they lived, and they had an outhouse on the back porch.
So another family was living in the second floor when they lived there.
Most of the time not. Most of the time it was vacant.
Okay, but they were only using the outhouse at that time.
Did you have a telephone in your house as a child?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think telephones were around long before I was.
Yeah.
Okay. Any special items in the house that you remember?
Many. Many.
Not in particular.
The living room, was it a formal parlor when you were little as well?
Yeah, it was sort of formally a living room and didn't get used much, like Christmas time and whatnot.
So Michael, how about for you? What was it like growing up here, and how do you think it might have been
Well, so I
different?
didn't grow up here.
Oh, you didn't.
I did not
Okay.
grow up here. Yeah. So I visited here as far back as I can remember. I would visit here.
What were your impressions?
So my mother's father died long years before I was born. He died. He died the year my parents were married, but he had died before the wedding. So I only knew my grandmother, and she was an active person, an active gardener.
She was still teaching school then.
Yeah, so she taught school until the late '60s here in this building, and this whole area, as my mom said, this was part of their farm.
What this building is
Yes.
sitting on.
All this lower area, and the school was built a year after my mom was born. So my grandmother was a school teacher. I mean, most of my recollection is after she retired from teaching school. This is my mother's mother, and I always found the house was fascinating because it was full of old things, kept immaculate, and there was and still is a safe, which wasn't locked, but it was a place to keep things safe from any fire, certainly, and it was full of fascinating things, old coins, gold nuggets from ancestors on my
Who'd gone to
mom's
California in the gold
mom's side
rush.
who'd gone west, who'd gone to California in the gold rush and sent back nuggets. And I would just on a daily basis go and open up the safe and look at all the things in there. And generally our visits were in the warm weather, and there was plenty outside to explore, and be here for a week or two at a time. And there weren't a lot of kids around, but I enjoyed myself nevertheless. And that went on through until she died in 1976. And then from 1976, for the next 31 years, there was a constant scramble by my mom to find tenants. And then in 2007, my mom moved back up here with my dad, who was retired, and they've been here since 2007. So,
Any impressions about what it was like here that was different from where you did grow up?
very, very much so. I mean, Vermont has always seemed special to me, and Marshfield has likewise seemed special. So, I was growing up in suburbs of first, well, St. Louis, then Nashville. So they're basically urban, suburban environments, and this was completely different. And in the 60s and 70s, Route 2 was a pretty quiet road. It didn't have a whole lot of traffic, and things in general were quiet. They were more my mom's relatives were living, so there were uncles, her father's brothers, and one of whom lived up on New Discovery, up the Groton Forest Road, and we would visit them, and other relatives and friends in the area. So.
Were there things that the family did together? You know, I've heard about some families who have made donuts and, you know, visited their mother on Sundays or something like that. Any
No.
special?
No.
There were close social ties. So, my grandmother, her only sibling lived in Connecticut, but she was very close with Zula Mears. So they two had married brothers, and Zula lived here in the village, right on Main Street.
And Zula can place her in that.
So Zula
Was the librarian.
was the librarian. It was the Jaquith librarian for many years.
And in the family, she's really...
So she was married to my grandfather's older brother. I don't know, he was ill and died when I was maybe 10 or 11. I have no particular recollection of him, but Zula lived until I was in my mid-20s, and I knew her quite well.
So she was your great...
She was, yeah, she was my great aunt, I'd say, by marriage, and a wonderful person, and also in social gatherings, especially in later years, Christmas, Zula would be of the party at Christmas time, and would spend time visiting her, spend time with her whenever we were in Marshfield. and so she lived about 10 years longer than my grandmother lived. But they were very, very close for many years. So I think by the time I came around, there were not as many sort of village activities, but there was definitely visiting amongst friends and family members.
So, Kathryn, what was school like for you? Where did you attend?
Right here.
This building. And it was then the Marshfield. What was it called?
School.
Would have been just
Initially, when I started, it was just the initial building, which was 4 rooms. And I have trouble relating it to this, it's all contained in this building, but it's hard to relate.
Were all 4 rooms the school?
I'm sorry?
Were all 4 rooms the school?
That was it.
Was it elementary only or through high school?
No, there was a 2-year high school. Your first 3 grades in one room, the next 3 in another room, 7th and 8th in another, and the high school in the 4th.
And then where did you go graduate? You said it was the first 2 years of high school?
Well, I had 2 years of high school then, but by the time they then added 3 rooms on the back of that building and made it a 4-year high school. And yeah, I think this room here was the high school room when I was in high school, and then I didn't graduate here. I went to St. Johnsbury.
So a final year in St. Johnsbury.
Yeah.
What was your best subject?
Oh, math, I guess.
And your worst?
I don't know.
Yeah, but so it was generally, when you were here, it was generally 3 grades together in a given
Yeah,
room.
when I started first grade, Evelyn Bullard, who was the daughter of the man who was the station master at the railroad station, and she was a family friend, and so she was my teacher for the first 2 grades.
Okay.
And then that was as you approached the building, that was the first room on the right. Behind that was the elementary room, and when I moved to 3rd grade, it was 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades in that room, and Harriet Davis Ward was the teacher, and she was some sort of a cousin. And then 7th and 8th grade was back to the front of the building in the room on the opposite side from where the 1st and 2nd grade had been. And that was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then the high school was in the room behind. And then they added the 3 other rooms, and one of those was home economics, and the others were used for various things.
And amongst some of the last people around that you were in school with were the Stanley Folsom was
Well, Audrey was in school.
Yeah, Audrey Huntington and Stanley Folsom, who just died a few years ago.
Well, last year, I
Was
think.
it,
I think it's in the last year that Stanley died.
Okay. And And Vera was also was in the school, but
She was 6 years ahead of me.
six
That was
years.
my cousin.
Yeah.
Vera,
So
Zula's
Vera
daughter.
was Zula's daughter. So
last name.
Mears again.
So I'm going to ask you about community life. So it might be a good time for you to talk about the ladies and the quilting that you
Well,
were interested in
that's
talking
sort of a little bit apart. But anyhow, as I said, my two sets of grandparents lived opposite each other on the Cabot Road, and I spent a lot of time with my grandmothers, and so the older ladies in the community did the quilting. You know, somebody would submit a patched quilt to them, and they would then do the quilting. And Matt, the Gilmans lived where the village store is, and they lived on the second floor, and they had the rooms there were very large. Big high ceiling rooms. There was a hall down the center, and then there were these big rooms. They lived mostly on one side. And because she had so much space, Matt Gilman housed the quilting. It got set up in her dining room, and the quilt would be stretched on planks, and they had C-clamps at the corners to keep the whole quilt stretched out tight. And of course, all this was rested on chair backs and whatnot. And then the ladies would come every afternoon and sit around and quilt, moving in. And as it gradually rolled up until they got to the middle and it was finished. But my grandmothers were very faithful about going, and a lot of older ladies, all the Worcester girls and Lillian Davis, and it was a little bit of a class thing, I think, but
Mm-hmm.
Say more.
mainly it was all the older ladies in town.
Class thing meanings people of a certain class came to the quilting?
I'm sorry?
Yeah. So the old ladies were the more prominent citizens of Marshfield.
Yeah, kind of that.
And how many women were quilting at one time?
Well, I was 3 or 4 years old at the time.
Okay.
I think there would be 8, 10, 12. Anyhow, they would sit around, and of course, I could crawl underneath, and they would all be gossiping away. They quilted and they talked.
Right. So the quilt would have been pieced and pinned together when it was brought to them.
The quilt is pieced, and it's put on a backing,
Mm-hmm.
and then it would be. No, I guess it's on the backing because you have to quilt through the backing
Yeah.
to do, and it was stretched tight on these.
Yeah.
On this thing, and then it could be rolled so that as they got the quilting in, they could move it in. So they were on opposite sides doing their quilting.
Who were these quilts made for? Do you know?
I don't know. People would, not necessarily local people, would submit a quilt to be quilted. People would piece a quilt, but they didn't want to. my grandmother Mears and my mother had like a big embroidery hook that they would put on a quilt and quilt themselves. But most people didn't want to do that or couldn't do that or whatever. So I don't think it was mostly local people probably who submitted quilts. I don't know how the network worked, how they found customers, but there always seemed to be a quilt to be done.
I know that Northfield has a huge quilt festival that goes back quite a ways. I wonder if there was always a showing somewhere.
No.
That would have developed in later years. When you were camped on the floor underneath the quilt, would you like have things to play with, or would you bring a doll or something?
No. I would wander around a lot because it was a big place with lots of rooms, and I would wander around through them. And there was a stereopticon with a lot of pictures, and I used to play with that.
Okay. Okay. Right.
But I would also sit under the quilt and listen to them gossiping, which they did.
Yeah.
What was that word you said that you used to look at the photos?
A stereopticon.
Can you describe what that is?
There should be one here in the collection, I would think. It was a thing that you'd have like a postcard that had two images of a picture, and you put it in, and you look through this. It had, magnified, and it would give you a depth view of the picture.
Okay.
These photos made with a stereopticon camera, I suppose, that is simultaneously taking a picture from slightly different angles.
I'm not quite sure about that, but anyhow,
Yeah.
The imposing two images gave a depth that, it was, pictures of places people had visited or one thing or another.
Right.
So of course back then, picture postcards were a very big thing. We've got albums of postcards.
So as an adult, can you describe, and I'll ask you this too, what it is like living in this community in Marshfield?
What it is like now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It bothers me because I hardly know anyone. When I was a child, I knew like every person. Now I don't know anyone. And
The big positive for living here lately has been this building.
yeah, having a library is certainly makes an enormous contribution to the life of the town, I think.
Are there any special things you like doing here? I'm thinking, as you mentioned, the library, like the Thursday night concerts, or...
Well, the library is here, the town clerk is here, the food shelf is here. My husband works in the food shelf a lot, and the Historical Society is a big contribution as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and Wednesday night spaghetti suppers, and the Thursday evenings in the summer with the food trucks and the
concerts outside.
So this is where you get to interact with other people in the community?
Yeah, it's, I think it makes a huge contribution. It makes a community. There wouldn't be one otherwise. Plain and simple, there wouldn't be.
And so how does it make it a community?
Well, that's where there's something to do here that draws people and they interact.
And what the thing my mom generally likes to do when the weather is good is to go driving about this part of Vermont and Vermont more in general. In the immediate area, going the roads that she used to take her horse on.
I used to ride all over Calais and Woodbury,
By yourself or with friends?
mostly by myself.
So, Michael, when did you move back here?
Just in the last couple of years. But I was up here frequently over the last 6 or more years. I mean, spending increasing time up here, going back and forth. So.
And you actually moved up in 2018.
Yeah.
And how would you say living here is for you? What do you enjoy about it? Or observe about it?
Yeah. Well, the closeness, the community focus, the opportunity that people do things with each other, the opportunity to get your milk from your neighbor's cow, and meat that's from your neighbor's animals. So there's lots of back and forth things among individuals who live near each other, and the challenges of the weather have their good points. I mean, in I think drawing people together to deal with these things. So it's just totally different from living in an urban area. So,
And when you say that about the challenges of the weather, what are you thinking?
well, I'm thinking of shoveling snow out of your way, of sometimes somebody's stranded and needs a lift, and it's not for everybody, I think, and that's fine. Basically, so as long as at the end of whatever you're doing outside, you've got a warm place to come into, I think it's good. So, yeah.
So aside from not knowing as many people today, how else is it different from when you were a child? Population, traffic,
For sure.
amenities. Because when the depot was here,
Mhm.
there was a lot more available, wasn't there,
Um,
to buy?
the depot had sort of a marginal relationship to the town. Well, when I was a child, part of the time my father was not only farming, but he worked in the creamery. And so once a day he would drive a truck with big cans of milk up to the station and load them onto the train. And
Heading for Boston?
what?
Heading for Boston?
Boston. And up here just across from the driveway down here on the other side of the road was the butterbox shop where Mr. Pitkin made butter boxes.
What is that?
Well, they were boxes for butter. One kind of box he made, and when I was a kid, I was told you could buy a butter box for 10 cents. And how I wish I had saved and bought a butter box for 10 cents. It was, I don't know how they cut the wood so thin, but there'd be this thin sheet of wood which was then curved around, and it had a round bottom, and then it had a lid that fitted on. It was a wonderful box. And he also made, I think, oblong boxes that were dovetailed. He had, I guess, a couple of employees, and the mill was water powered, and or I don't know if it's water powered or if it generated, the water generated electricity to run things. I don't know for sure about that. But he had a couple of employees, and there was the butterbox factory, and there was outbuildings and a dry shed. And he had a Model T truck with a stake body, and every so often all the butter boxes would be put into little crates, little wooden open crates, loaded on their Model T and driven up to the station and loaded on the train. And by the same token, further up the street was Silas Packer, who had chickens, and he had a horse named Rex. And every so often, he would load up a wagon with crates of eggs and hook up Rex and drive up to the station and put the eggs on the train. So that was...
So there was more industry here.
Yeah, cottage industry.
It was pretty limited.
Now, so
there was a blacksmith shop. And
now that was back street.
no, that was over right as you come down Road 2, just before you turn across the bridge there. That was on the
Okay.
right-hand side.
Okay.
Of Depot Road.
No.
On the other side of Route 2.
Route 2, just before Creamery Street, or right at the corner.
Yeah, it was on this side, right below Stanley Folsom's house.
Oh, okay.
Time. I just want to do a time check. How are we doing?
Yeah.
What time is
That
it?
is just about an hour.
Is it? All right, let
Yeah.
me just ask a couple of questions. What would you say to someone thinking of moving here today?
Well, I certainly encourage my son to move back.
Yeah.
No, it's a totally different place.
It seems to me that
I think Vermont, I mean, we chose to move back to Vermont because we thought Vermont's a good place to be.
And can you describe why? I know you've said a little already, but
well, I mean, I guess the only caveat, limitation, if a great number of people were to come, is the increasing traffic on Route 2. But generally, probably there aren't going to be that many people, and those who do, I think there's a lot of space for people to do whatever it is they like to do, and telecommuting certainly, I think, fits in nicely and will probably be better as internet infrastructure is increased. But it seems like people hook into the community here very, very, very quickly. That this community center is so visible, and people will need to come anyway for the town clerk, and right away they realize that there are all these other things going on. So it's possible for people to live several miles away and have plenty of space and yet have this nexus here.
So you think you'll stay here?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there, I can't imagine living anywhere else in the U.S. I mean, I have my ties overseas, but
Professionally?
Personally at this point, since my wife is from East Africa, but so she will continue to divide her time between here and Tanzania, and but she'll generally be wanting to be here when the weather's good.
So she likes it as much as you do, when the weather's good.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, she is a very vigorous gardener as well. So that's yes, and you can say that there are similar elements of community here as well as in Tanzania. So they both meaning people more connected to each other, less isolated by cars and the urban landscape, whatever, things like that.
My last question is, do you have any questions to ask each other?
Well, those are ongoing.
He asks me those all the time.
Yeah, but
Or anything that you'd like recorded here that I haven't asked about?
I don't think so right now.
The only thing I'm not sure I did in the beginning was getting the full name of both your sets of parents. So if you could say the names of all four, let's see, no, it would just
Yeah.
be your parents and then your grandparents is what I meant.
Uh-huh.
So
your mother's full name, you gave that, and your father's
she
full name.
was
So your
Well,
grandparents.
no, well, so father's full didn't get father's full name.
Harry William Mears. And my grandparents were Florence Rogers Norris and Samuel Jonathan Norris and Josiah Wood Mears and Gertrude Haynes Mears.
Wonderful.
Yeah.